Good evening, class. We're so glad to have you joining us from so many different places. And I'd like to know that you are watching, so if you will either call or write to the address that's on the website, we'd love to hear from you. And if you would like to give, if you are sitting in front of me, we have a Joash chest up here. We do not take up an offering because we want to spend all of our time in the teaching of the word. But if you would like to give an offering, the Joash chest is up in the front of the room, and there are envelopes there. If you are at home and you would like to give in response to the teaching that you're receiving, you can do that by on the website. You can send it in the old-fashioned way. If you're local and you're in the area, you can feel free to drop in your offering in the drop box in the lobby of the church. And I think hopefully you know how to do that. So we are in the second verse of the 9th chapter of the book of Romans, and I am going to read that second verse. This is just change in weather for me. I don't have the epizooty or anything like that. It's just that this is the sinus belt, and sometimes I'm.
You're not allowed to live in Ohio unless you have sinuses.
It's true. So this chapter is covering God's election of Israel. And just so you kind of know in a long range where we're going to go, once we're done with the 9th chapter, I'm going to go back. We're going to do a history because I don't want to assume that most people know about the division of the kingdoms, what happened. So we will do that to get a history, why certain promises were given to certain sons of Israel and instead of another son. And so we will have to do that. We won't do it in great detail, but I will give you an overview before we go into the 10th chapter. So the second chapter says, because grief is great for me and pain is increasing in my heart, because the Apostle Paul had a great burden for his people, the Jewish people. So sorrow, he said, I have great pain, sorrow. The word is lupe. It is Strong's 3077. And so I'm going to read a couple other translations just that will help you kind of color in the meaning of this verse. The NIV says, I have great sorrow and unceasing anguish in my heart. The Phillips translation, when I say that there is something that makes me feel very depressed, like a pain that never leaves me. West says that I have a consuming grief, a great one, and intense anguish in my heart without a let-up. And Young's literal translation says that I have great grief and unceasing pain in my heart. So Paul was writing to the Roman church, and he was basically telling them, this is how I feel toward my people. Because when Jesus came on the scene, they had all of the covenants, they had all of the promises, they had the scriptures. And when he stood before them, they missed it. So he said, I have sadness, I have grief, sadness, grief, note 17, pain, and sorrow. In grief is odune. It means intense pain. You know, there's pain and then there's intense, that emotional pain, anguish, torment. And he said it's continual. There's no let up. How many have ever had a burden for an unsaved loved one and you can relate to what that feels like? It's unremitting. And so It's continual. Audioliptos, without ceasing. Continual. Without intermission. Incessant.
What was that? What did you say?
Incessant. Incessant. It means it's constant, constant, constant. Kind of like what I experience where I live. No. But it's the truth. I have a family that lives above me. And I mean, it sounds like they're tearing the place apart, brick by brick, consistently. And so there's no, literally, I mean, it sounds like they're running buffalo overhead. And I'm telling the truth. If you ever have been in my home, you'll know that's what's happening. And then it never quiets down till maybe 11:30, if we're fortunate. And then because of who they are, they're up at 4 a.m. and they think because they're up at 4 a.m., everybody is up at 4 a.m., kids and all, and then it starts all over again. So it's incessant. And sometimes I will say, does this have to be incessant? And of course the answer is yes, I guess.
Yes.
And he says he has it in his heart. It's cardia. And this word is always used in Scripture to refer to the seat and center of human life. It's the seat of where the Spirit is. And Paul is saying in the very center of my being, that's what is happening there for my brethren. It's the wellspring of one's spiritual life. So it's very clear here that Paul had a continual, great burden in the seat and center of his spiritual life for the salvation of his people. And he is saying that he continually has great sadness because of the Jewish people's rejection of their Messiah. And you can imagine that they had every reason to recognize Jesus when he came on the scene, and they didn't. Now some did, but how many know that it was those who had ears to hear?
Yeah.
And Jesus even said to them, he said, how is it that you search the Scriptures, and the Scriptures speak of me? Yes?
Didn't it say that God blocked their ears?
Yes, and we will get that later as we get into, but actually, it's he allowed them to block their own. But they were blinded for a season. But understand, there were still those who saw and received. Understand, who were the 500 at the ascension? They were Jewish people. Who were the 120 in the upper room? They were Jewish. Who were the first 3,000 converts and the first 5,000? They were Jewish. And so really the majority of the fathers in the early days of the church were Jewish. And now, unfortunately, what has happened, and we talked about that last week, then as it went on, then the church became more Gentile. And in becoming more Gentile, for centuries and centuries and centuries, the body of Christ lost its Jewish history, perspective. If you were to pick out just somebody walking into church usually on a Sunday morning, and you would say to them, what does it mean in Corinthians when it says Christ our Passover is sacrificed for us? I would dare say many wouldn't even have a clue. They say, well, no. because we've lost the concept of our Jewish roots of the Christian faith.
Yes.
So why was it that Jesus spoke to his disciples and said, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees?
Yes.
See, if you don't understand the first 2/3 of the Bible and have an understanding of it, how are you going to understand the last third?
Man.
And you can't. And you really can't. And so for Paul, looking at the tragedy, they had it. They had the promises. They had the prophecies. And so when he stood there, they should have recognized it. And it is a tragedy that for much of the Gentile church, they have no concept of the Old Testament. And I would say you aren't going to be able to fully understand the times in which we are living right now if you do not understand the prophetical books. And I'll say this, you cannot fully understand the book of Revelation without the Old Testament prophets.
Man.
So, if you're committed to something, if you're really committed to something, you know that it will affect your will. You know, many times we'll say, well, I really wish I could do that. And yet, it lies undone. You know what I'm talking about. Well, I really am committed to get this done. But if you really say, I am absolutely committed to this, eventually it will affect your will, and your will help you, and your will then will affect your emotions. You are here tonight because you were committed to coming and studying the Word of God. It affected your will. Do you know how many people I have listed who filled out enrollment forms that I haven't seen the whites of their eyes? And yet, do you understand? It was, oh yeah, I'll do that. But there was no real commitment. How many are going to be committed? You got to show up. And it affects your will. Then your will kicks in. And then in turn, I believe it will affect your emotions. You'll say, I love the Word of God. Prior to your salvation, you probably had no commitment, and certainly you had no emotional effect for the Word of God. But you do now. Now let's look at the 3rd verse. Let me do this first. I want to give you this. Do we care, and I want us to really think about this question, do we care about the multitudes who, without embracing the atoning work of Jesus Christ, will spend eternity in hell? I'm going to let that just drop for a minute. Because the reality is, I know that's not politically correct, but I don't think I've been politically correct since I came out of my mother's womb. But understand, everybody says, oh no, we have all different paths. No, there isn't all different paths. And if someone does not embrace salvation through Jesus Christ and his atoning work, they are lost. Because I'm a Christian. I believe what the Bible says. I believe that the Bible is the inerrant Word of God, and this Word says there is salvation in no other name but the name of Jesus. That's it. But how concerned are we about their future? Do you understand how many people we see in a day? If they don't know Jesus, they're lost. Is there a time when we have a compassion that I believe is given by the Lord? And that compassion then is motivated by our Savior. And I would never embarrass anybody, so I'm not going to give the person's name. I'm not even going to say how this came about. But over a period of time, I mean, actually probably at least 2.5 years at least, we just began to develop a relationship with this particular young lady. And over time, we kind of got to know about her child, and then met the lady who took care of her child. Just developed a wonderful lady. And it started because I had said to the lady who was taking care of her child, and by the way, many other children, I think she is fostered, I mean, I don't know how many, 140 in her lifetime or something like that. And she just adopted the little, we just fell in love with this little boy. And we got the news that she decided late in life to adopt him so he knows he has a future and a hope. But in our talking with her, we just, hey, it was just a compassion of the Lord. And we were shocked. I have to admit, I mean, you know, I do not believe in lapel grabbing. What do I mean? I believe we have to allow the Lord to lead us. And so this past Sunday, she said, would it be okay, because my schedule's changed, she said, would it be okay if I came to church Sunday? And we said, of course, we would love to have you. She said, could I sit with you? I'm thinking, oh, yes. So just pray, just pray that will, and she's going to bring my child. I said, of course. I have, and I've shared another, and it was just a kind of a life, I told you about one years and years ago, the relationship that my mother and I developed with somebody who actually at work came and said, I've been diagnosed with something, would you pray for me? And I said yes, and she said, well, if I go and clock out, will you pray for me right here and lay hands on me? And I'm looking around, and yes, and I did. And out of that, the manager came over. It was, I mean, positive, and said, will you be kind of the chaplain for this place? And I said, whoa, wait. And actually, that came. And I can't tell you the time she would come and get me and say, we've got somebody who is really having a problem, and they're sitting there. Would you come and talk to her? Listen, I believe if we're open, God will use us. He will use us. We just have to be open. Do we care? See, the Apostle Paul had that kind of care. I believe that we need to be concerned enough to pray. And by the way, we can all do that, right? So we can be thankful, and we can be grateful that the Lord will put individuals in our path. And we can be faithful stewards in the work of the Lord. Now, in the 3rd verse of the 9th chapter, for I could, and I want you to hear what Paul is saying. There's no doubt that Paul has a great, deep desire for the salvation of his natural brethren. He said, for I could wish to be accursed to God myself, separated from the Messiah on behalf of my brothers, my kinsmen, according to the flesh. Now, what he is saying is that that's how much if it would take that to see them saved, that's how intense his concern was. So he said, wish, eukomen. And the idea of this word is to desire something with the implication of a pious wish. I really, really, really want to see their salvation. And Paul uses here the imperfect tense. And the imperfect, of course, pictures a repeated action. In other words, it's not just once. He is repeating that. Or a continual action in the past. I did this. I kept doing it. And here's here's the thing. It wasn't that Paul was actually wishing to be lost. Okay, I hope you all see that. But he was saying this. He said, this could be translated, I was even on the point of wishing that I'd be accursed for their sake. That, in other words, it went right to that point. I so desired to see my brethren saved. Accursed, in note 21, is the word that is quite familiar to those of you who took Greek. Anathema. Anathema. And in the context of this verse, anathema refers to estrangement from Christ. I don't think there's one person sitting in front of me, and I dare say there's not one person tuning in tonight to the class that would ever want to be estranged from Christ. Estranged from anything else or anyone else, but never want to be estranged from Christ and his salvation. Because there is salvation in no other name but the name of Jesus. And so Paul is expressing a grief that is in his heart for his people. Do you know, it is really not easy, as you read this, to estimate the measure of the love in Paul for his people. You know, having a burden is the beginning. Loving the lost is the first step in leading them to Christ. And I will say this, there are too many people who think we in the church hate them. And I believe that we have in many ways failed to let them see that we may hate the thing that is destructive in their life. But the reason why we hate that which is destructive in their life is because we love them so much that we do not want to see that happen in their life. But we have to have a love. We cannot say, well, if they're lost, you know, they can just go to hell. That should never be our attitude. Ever be our attitude. Loving the lost is the first step in leading them to Christ. And there was a man by the name of Fitzhugh who wrote this: Lord, give me a burden for the dying, for the lost wherever they be. Help me to care that they are heading for a dark eternity. See, until we actually realize that that's truth, we won't care. But the Lord needs to give us that kind of care. Then he says from, which is apo, which means away. And this word is what we call a marker dissociation. You don't need to remember that term. Just remember that it implies a rupture from a former association. There's probably some relationship that you had sometime in your life that has been destroyed or broken or ruptured. And so you can think about that. And so anytime you see apo in the Greek, that's what it is. It's, okay, there's been a dissociation. There's been a rupture from an association. So this preposition conveys the idea of away from, separation, departure, and cessation, or ending. Apo refers to any separation of one thing by another, by which the union or fellowship of the two is destroyed.
What was that word, Paul?
Fellowship. Fellowship. So really what Paul is trying to express here is he said, I was right up next to saying, even if it took that to see my brothers come to salvation, right up there, just almost to that point. That's how much he desired it. And he says, in other words, he's talking about his brothers, according to the flesh, kata sarka, and I've given you the Strong's word, so if you want to look those up. But in this context, flesh speaks of the physical lineage of Paul and the Jews. He had a physical lineage. Christ, and when you understand, Paul didn't have to do that. And even if Paul did, it wouldn't work, right? Even though he said, I was willing to just go right up to the door. Because why? It's already been done. Christ did become a curse for us. Curse. He took the curse. That's a beautiful passage in Galatians, because when it talks about that Christ hath redeemed us from the curse, the word picture there in the Greek is the curse is ready to fall. And you're right there, and I'm right there, and it is going to fall. If you've ever seen, sometimes in the movies they have that, something's starting to fall. Yeah. And basically that word picture, Christ hath redeemed us, that word there means it was ready to fall, and Jesus came and pushed you out and let the curse fall on him, having been made a curse for us. It's already been done. He entered into the awful shadow of God's wrath for us. The wrath fell on him. So you see, Jesus already did what Paul said he could wish. If that would do it, he would do that. Wish. So let's see about what he continues to say. He said, my brethren, according to my brethren, okay, of the flesh, who are Israelis. And I will explain that. Of whom are the adoption and the glory and the covenants and the giving of the Torah or teaching and the worship and the promises. Do you understand? That was given to Israel. God had a special covenant with Israel. When God desired to come down, and God desired to come down and speak with his people. They heard his audible voice one time and said, we have a better plan. Moses, you go and talk to God for us, and then you come back and tell us what God. This is just we can't handle this. God's okay. And by the way, that's when he instituted the office of the prophet. Because understand, a priest speaks to God on behalf of the people. The prophet speaks to the people on behalf of God. It's okay. He said, I'll raise up another one. Okay, Moses went. He said, now, actually the first prophet was Abraham. Because God, by the way, the first person God called a prophet was Abraham. And if you're interested in that and you would like to hear more about that, you'll have to come on Sunday morning. And you'll have to come in person on Sunday morning. We don't put that on YouTube, but we're starting on that. Yes?
Do you have a Sunday school class before
Yes, I do,
church?
right here. Yes, right in here. And I will tell you, it's at 9 o'clock.
Usually here at quarter till.
Well, usually we're here at quarter till, but usually I start at 9. Yes, so if you're at home, 9 o'clock here, and I will tell you that we've started the introduction, but the topic, but we're building the foundation. We're building the foundation because if you know me, or if you don't know me, it's still true. Everything I teach has to have the foundation of the Word of God. And so I am beginning a series on Sunday morning, America in Bible Prophecy. You may have heard out there, America is not in Bible prophecy. I beg to differ with you. America is in Bible prophecy. And America is indeed one of the providential nations listed in the Word of God. And so you'll have to come and find out what a providential nation is. And I will define that for you. But we do have a role to play. And I might, after we stop being live, tell you about somebody I heard. And it's bad enough when you hear it anyway, but when you hear it late at night, it's like your brain begins to be like scrambled eggs. I'm thinking, where did you get that? That he was so off. So, according to the flesh, so he's speaking of the physical lineage of Paul and the Jews. Christ did become a curse for us. He entered into the awful shadow of God's wrath for us, and he did what Paul could only wish. Now we're going to look at the 4th verse, and I gave that to you. Let me just read a couple different translations. The Phillips translation said, just think what the Israelites have had given to them. Remember I said there's a reason why it says Israelites here. When we move along, actually when we go into the history and the division of the kingdoms, I will explain to you why we are using the term, Paul will use it many times, Israel, and not just Jew or Jewish, and we will explain why. But he says, just think what the Israelites have had given to them. The privilege of being adopted as sons of God. You do know that God called Israel my son. The experience of seeing something of the glory of God. They saw enough of the glory of God at Mount Sinai that they said, oh no, it's okay, Moses, you do it and come back and tell us. Because they saw lightnings and thunderings and fire and smoke on the mountain, and they heard rumbling. Now, and I will say this, you do know that there was a mixed multitude that came out of Egypt, right? Because there were people who had come into Egypt, and there were Egyptians, and there were other people that were brought to Egypt. And when they were freed from bondage, some of those people went with them.
Yes.
And so it's kind of an interesting thing if you will compare what happened at Mount Sinai to the day of Pentecost. Because we understand when it said languages, they heard noises and language. They heard, the mixed multitude heard what God's voice in their language. And it was just so overpowering. Oh, no, no, no. No, we don't want to hear that ever again. Do you understand the tragedy of that? But do you know what happened on the day of Pentecost? Do you know that was reversed? Because understand something. Remember what they said? No, it's just going to be you be a human mediator between us. You go get what God wants us to know, and then you come and tell us. But on the day of Pentecost, have you ever wondered why it said, and there were cloven tongues as a fire that separated and came and sat upon each of them? And you read in the New Testament, it says you don't have need of any man to tell you. Why? Because you have the Spirit. But that doesn't mean we aren't instructed and taught. I mean what I'm saying. But it's for, do you understand that the veil into the presence of God was rent in two? We have access. And so the Spirit came and sat upon each of them. There was an indwelling of each of them. That Sinai, they said, no, oh, no. You just keep all that fire to yourself, Moses, then you come and talk to us. But in the day of Pentecost, it was divided. There's some, I know, I'm probably one of the only people that would see all this stuff, but it's there. It's truth that's there. So he is talking about what they had. To whom was given the law and the covenants, and who are possessors of the sacred service and the promises. Young's literal translation says, who are Israelites, whose is the adoption and the glory and the covenant and the law giving and the service and the promises. That all was given to Israel. So Israelites refer to the descendants of Abraham through Jacob. And remember, Jacob's name was changed to Israel. Like I said, we will go all the way back to Abraham, and we will begin to see the covenant promises. Understand something, they kept narrowing, right? Narrowing. From the time God gave a promise to Abraham, then it was narrowed, and then it was narrowed further, and then it was narrowed further. And I will tell you, when we get to the sons of Israel, it narrows even further, and there's a reason for it. So the adoption, they had the weothesia, the placing of one as a son. Do you understand what it meant for Israel, that God said to Israel, "You're my son. Of all the nations, I've chosen you. Abraham, I'm going to make of you a great nation. Special, different from any other nation." In the New Testament, weothesia, which is used in Romans 9:4, is used figuratively, meaning adoption or sonship. Sonship. And that refers to the state of those whom God, through Christ, adopts as his sons and makes heirs, H-E-I-R-S, heirs of his covenanted salvation. It's a state. Now, you may be a daughter of God, but you still have that legal position. Okay? But that is not necessarily how Paul is using this word in this context, because sons in this verse, that's wonderful, but God has sovereignly selected an entire nation and adopted them as his sons. Now, we know that individually we are the sons and daughters of God, right? Through Christ. But here we're talking about sovereignly selecting an entire nation. Now, there are people today who are quite upset about that. No, I actually know someone, and finally I just said, I love him, I love his family, but I'm not reading any more of this. I don't understand why, considering his background. But anyway, Israel's not the chosen of the Lord, and they're not God's special people. And I'm thinking, how can you read the Bible and not know that? And I just got to a point where I thought, enough. Sometimes you can love and pray for somebody from a distance, but you don't have to increase your blood pressure. Because there are just some people, understand, please hear me, I wrote letters, I tried, I did everything to say, but the Word says what the Word says. And basically trying to get this individual to see God is sovereign. And in his sovereignty, he's God. He can make any decision that he wants. It's like you. You know, the one time you get to play a demigod is when you write your will. How many know what I'm talking about? Right? Because it's the one time that you can say, this is how it's going to happen, and you sign that. And no matter what anyone else says, it's going to be what you say if you were of sound mind when you signed that. Believe me, I've been on the receiving end of something that I thought was very unfair, and I don't really think it was so much unfair as the fact that I personally don't think that loved one was in sound mind, but that's neither here nor there. But guess what? It still got probated, and that's how it got probated. And I look at certain other people that are just having a wonderful time right now. That's okay. Because we're all going to the same heaven, and we get to heaven, they're not going to be any higher up than I am. Their mansion, their apartment. No, please hear me. I can say the word apartment.
Yes.
Because John 14 says, in my Father's house are many compartments.
Rooms too. Right?
Yeah, which means building on to Father's house. Listen, I don't know about you, but I'm going to Father's house. And if I live in a heavenly compartment in Father's house, that heavenly compartment's going to be pretty awesome, because my God's an awesome God. Okay. But he was sovereign. He was sovereign. And so sometimes you just have to say, Lord, you reveal it. And how many know God's able to one day reveal it?
Yes.
People want truth. God will reveal it. So it referred to him selecting that nation to receive his special calling. The nation of Israel, and when I'm talking about the nation of Israel, I'm talking about the sons of Jacob, have a special calling. And now I'm going to say something that will probably rile many people who might be listening. God is not finished with his natural people, Israel.
Praise God.
He's not.
Praise God.
It referred to him selecting this nation to receive his covenants. Do you understand? The covenants were delivered. Were delivered to Abraham, repeated to Isaac, repeated to Jacob. Now please hear me. Abraham had other sons. But God was sovereign. And he said, no, this is the child of promise. Now he continues to bless. And by the way, there is more than Ishmael. And he blessed Abraham's other offspring. But there was a special calling, and the covenant went to Isaac. And then it didn't go to Esau, it went to Jacob. And you will begin to see more and more and more and more it gets narrowed down. He chose them to receive blessings. Is Israel blessed?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Is God still doing miracles in the nation of Israel?
Amen.
Yes, he is. Just a few years ago, there was darkness. What happened was a whole regiment of Israeli soldiers were kind of stuck in a situation, and it looked like they were going to be wiped out. And all of a sudden, this huge dark cloud came and literally sat down between them and the enemy. That happened, I believe, in 2015. Does that sound like anything else we've read about? Remember when the children of Israel were fleeing? They'd been delivered, set free from Egypt, and they are what I called, when I have taught that, they were truly between a rock and a hard place, because they had a rock wall up one side, a rock wall on the other, the Red Sea in the middle, and Pharaoh's army coming from behind. That's being squeezed in a pretty tight place. And all those people were thinking, how are we going to do this? They were, and then Moses is out there with his rod. And when it says cleave, that word in the Hebrew means beat repeatedly. Now I want you to see this picture. Moses is out with his rod beating the water, splashing the water. Can you imagine what some critical, and believe me, there were plenty of critical people among the children of Israel. And they said, what do you think he's trying to do? Splash all the water out? We got to come up with a plan here. We're not water people. We're desert people. But you know what God did? It said the presence of God came in a cloud and sat down in front of Pharaoh's army. It was a dark cloud to Pharaoh's army, but it was the answer to God's people. And I don't know how many times, it was 7. I don't know how many times Moses struck the water, but at one point in the cleaving, guess what happened? It split and rolled up, and they went over on dry ground. There wasn't even any mud, hallelujah.
Yeah, really.
That's God. He's still working miracles. And what we need to realize is God's sovereign. And he has a right to do that. And that serves as his witness to a godless world. I want to read from Exodus 19:6. A witness.
What's before witness?
Blessings. 16:9.
19:6.
You got 19:6.
Oh, okay. I thought I looked at them. I don't think that's right.
19:6, is that right?
Yeah, 19:6.
We're not the
I know.
And you will be a kingdom of priests to me. Does God have the sovereign right to do that? Yes. And a holy nation. He said, those are the words which you will speak to the children of Israel. So God had every right to do that. Now, the glory. This is, wow. Okay. Theirs is the adoption, but it's something else, the glory. Doxa. And I've given you the word there. Now, doxa is used repeatedly in the Septuagint, and the Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Old Testament. And actually, that Jesus would have read the Septuagint, because it was in the what English, well, used to be, and being kind of a universal language, Greek was at that time. And so the scriptures were translated. It's called the Septuagint because it was 70 scholars who did that translation of the Hebrew into the Greek. And so doxa in the Greek Old Testament is used to refer to the Shekinah glory of God. And so literally, this word means to give a proper opinion or estimate of something. Estimate, E-S-T-I-M-A-T-E, estimate of something. Now, and the thing is, when you look at God and you begin to give a proper estimate of God, it's like glory. I mean, how can you begin to say everything God is? You can't. So, thus, the glory of God expresses all that he is in his being and in his nature, power, character, and acts. Acts, A-C-T-S. I come from southeastern Ohio. And people know that, and my American family came from Virginia. So I talk funny. When I went to college and university, I went from southeastern Ohio to northwestern Ohio. I thought they talked funny in northwestern Ohio, Toledo, Bowling Green. They thought they would tell me I talked funny. So Jesus gives a correct opinion of all that God is. In John 1, and let's go there. So, okay, to John 1:14. I've got it a little bit later there, but. Do you know that Jesus, and by the way, I first heard that from Dr. Gene Scott. He said Jesus is the exegesis of God the Father. How many know what exegesis is? Okay. For those of you at home, I didn't get one hand, so I'm going to. Okay. Exegesis is the examined explanation of something. So when we are looking at the scripture, I'm going to exegete this scripture. I'm going to go, and by the way, you may not have remembered the word, but you knew what we did. When we would take a passage in Greek, remember, and then we looked at it word by word and all of the grammar. I know many of you said, oh, I wanted to forget that. We looked at the voice, right? The tense, the verb. We looked at the person. We looked at the mood. All of that was exegeting, giving a full explanation. Remember when Jesus made this statement to the disciples? And they said, well, we'll be really happy if you just show us the Father. And Jesus turns to them and says, what? If you have seen me, you've seen the Father. What he meant was, I am the exegesis of the Father. And so, when you look at John 1:14, it says, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, doxa. Now here's the key. The glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. So it was, if you want to see the Father, and it's like the Father said, I'm going to show you what I am like. I'm going to pull back the curtain, and here stands the exegesis of God. So he is the exegesis. So he expresses everything. So Jesus gives us a correct opinion of all that God is, so that to see Jesus is to see God. For in Jesus himself, and by the way, here's another explanation of the word exegesis, the outraying. So Jesus himself is the outshining, outraying of the majesty of the Father. And I know it's only one line there because they ran together. I have one of those self-correcting computers, and sometimes I would like to, just lay hands on it suddenly because it corrects things that I don't want corrected. I said, oh.
Like it's your cell phone.
Yeah, yes, texting. I don't do that well either. No, I don't want this to go out over. But I was typing something and I said, God will take care of this. And then I sent it. And then I looked at it. Gid will take care of this. So if you get text from me, you have to interpret the text you receive from me. So the Son, being one with the Father, is in himself and ever was the outraying of the glory, manifesting in himself all that God is and does. And I've given you some scriptures there. I I jumped a little bit ahead a few seconds ago, so let me go to John 1:18. No one has seen God at any time. And remember, even when Moses said, I want to see you, and he said, you can just see my hinder parts. So what he basically saw was the trail of the glory of God when he passed by. But it says, no one has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, who is in the bosom of the Father, he has declared him. And that word, and I've given it to you there, is exegesata. How many see you can see the exegesis word there? So this word means that Jesus is the explanation or exegesis of the glory of God the Father. And that's why I said we beheld his glory. He's declared the glory of God to us. Jesus as the God-man gives detailed information of the glory of the Father. And I'm going to go back because I know you're probably, because I skipped, and I skipped down and went back up. So let me do 26 note. Any questions before 26 note? Anyone has a question about before 26? Okay. So this word doxa means to give a proper estimate of something. So the glory of God expresses all that God is in his being and in his nature. The nature of God is glory, power, character, and acts. Okay. Jesus gives a correct opinion of all that God is, so that to see Jesus is to see God. For in Jesus himself is the outshining or outray of the majesty of the Father. The Son being one with the Father. And Jesus said, I and my Father are one. Is in himself and ever was the outraying of the glory. He was the outraying of the glory of God, manifesting in himself all that God is and does. And Jesus gives us detailed information of the glory of the Father. And John writing says, and we beheld, right? We beheld his glory. When we looked at Jesus, we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father. Whatever the Father is, and then Hebrews, lead us to Hebrews, because basically Hebrews said that the Son is the exact representation of the essence of God. Whatever God is, the Son is. Same substance. And we dealt with that, right? The difference between homoousios and homoiousios. Jesus is homoousios with the Father, the same substance. How many, I'm just going to throw this in because some of you will remember. Remember what I said, where we get the expression iota? I don't care an iota. Well, you need to care an iota. Iota is the Greek letter that makes the difference between being like God and being same substance with God. Homoiousios means like, but there's a distinction. Homoousios means same substance. So that, and what happened is there was a great council in the church to decide whether Jesus was homoi or homoousios. And that's why one of those statements that was made there, the iota is important. And the person made, well, I don't care an iota. And they said, you need to care. And so aren't you glad that that council came out and said, Jesus is the same substance with the Father. The covenants. Diathekai. Diathekai. And this referred to a declaration of the will of God concerning his self-commitment. In other words, do you know that God told Israel, I'm committed to you? He gave his promises. That was the will of God, to give his promises to Israel. And he gave to Israel conditions by which he entered into relationship with man. God made no covenant with the Gentiles. I want to stop here right now. I'm talking about as a nation. He made no covenant with the Gentiles as nations, as people groups. He made these covenants with Israel because that nation was used, and here's the key, to be a channel to bring salvation to the human race. The Savior came from Israel. Now, he was also sovereign in giving the law to Israel. Hey, nomothesia. So, the law. So the Mosaic law was given to Israel to be their schoolmaster. And I need to explain this word because it's not a teacher. The word schoolmaster was something that someone in the New Testament was someone who would actually take a child to school, get them where they needed to be, and would be right with them as they received their lessons to explain the lesson to them. So the law was to do what? It was to get us to the place we needed to be. And the place we needed to be, it was like a mirror. You know, somebody can be trying to teach you where there is a spot on your face, right? Ever tried to do that with someone? You're out eating with someone and they'll say, there's something out there. And you're going, and they'll say, no, you haven't got it yet. No, you haven't got it. And hang with me for a minute. Because we're going to pull this into the spiritual realm. You're not doing this right. You aren't there yet. And eventually, if you have now men, I don't know what you do, but we women, eventually what we'll do is pull out a compact.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Now, that's what the law was. See, you could have gone and said, well, you know, you shouldn't do this. Now, we, looking back, can know that Cain killing Abel was wrong. Understand, that was, he did it in anger and he thought, my problem's solved. No, his problems were just beginning. But understand, when the law came, it wasn't a matter of everybody does whatever they want to do whenever they feel it's okay and no matter what, right? Because now the law came and said what? Thou shalt not murder. Oh. So understand, the law put up a mirror and said, this is, that's wrong. But what the mirror can't do, have you ever tried to wash your face with a mirror? Now hang with me, I'm getting a spiritual point there. You can't. The law couldn't make you clean. The law couldn't make you righteous. It just could show you that you're not righteous. And to try, and by the way, do you know how many people try through legalism? I am going to be righteous before God. And they have all the list of do-dos and don't-dos, and do-dos and don't-dos. There's just way too much do-do around. You cannot get righteous just doing the do-dos and the don't-dos. Because the law cannot make you righteous. If the law could make you righteous, Jesus would never have had to come. But it can't. But it can show you what righteous is. And then when Jesus came, through the power of the Holy Spirit, we are made righteous through Christ. Do we need the law? Yeah, because we need to know that we have need of a Savior. But once Christ comes and his atoning work is powerful, then we don't need that. So the law was to be what? It was to be that schoolmaster and make sure they got where they needed to be, where they said, yes, we need something beyond the law. But you understand, when Jesus stood in front of them, the exegesis of the glory of God, they missed him because they were hanging on to the law. Well, the law. And Jesus said, wait a minute, I didn't come to destroy the law, but I've come to fulfill it, because if you stay in the law and don't move forward, you're not going to be any better off than you are before. And this is what Peter said on the day of Pentecost, is what Paul preached. He said, if you're going to stay here instead of moving into the fullness of what Christ has purchased, you are lost, because the law will never make you righteous. The law could not, even the sacrificial system through the law could never take care of the guilt. It could take care of the penalty, because God said, I will accept these sacrifices until one will come whose blood was worth enough to buy up all the promissory notes from the sacrifices of the Old Testament system. So, the giving of the law, and I'm going to have to stop there. I have to stop there. I would love to go on and just do the service of God. We're going to pick up at the service of God next Wednesday. And I will explain what that is, because I want to take some time on that and explain that. Any questions? If you are at home tonight, you have some questions about the teaching tonight, please feel free to call in your questions, or you can write them in, and if possible, I will answer any questions that you send in, any comments that you have about the teaching. So I will give that to you. If you miss, and I've had people call in and say, I missed such and such a note, can you give it to me? And yes, I will. And usually what I'll do is, once we start the class, anyone that has called in and said, I missed such and such a note, I will take care of that and give that to you. If you would have a prayer request, please let us know. We would love to pray for you. And I would like this prayer request. Would you please pray for our nation? Our nation needs prayer. And the other thing I would like to ask is, if you're out there and you would love to go to Israel with us, we have 5 spaces for any combination of women or men or couples. I have 1 space for a gentleman to room with another man. But after those 6 spaces are gone, they're gone. We will be at our maximum. There is nothing like a trip to Israel. It's been said a trip to Israel is like a year in Bible college. So if you'd like to go with us, call the number that's on the website. Say that you're interested in information about Israel, the Israel trip in October of this year, and it is a 100% on. We will definitely be going after all this wait, so we would love to have you join us. So call, we will get the information out to you, and I pray that you will realize how privileged you are to be a follower of Jesus Christ. Have a great rest of the week, and know that we love you, and Jesus loves you, and don't forget, Jesus is Lord.
Amen.